Welcome back to Liquid Lunch. My name is Hildegard Gmeiner, and earlier today, we spoke about calming the waters inside the body. Next, we are going to talk about different inventions, and one of them today is about how to utilize water and to have potable water regardless where you are. My next guest is Roger Walsh. He is the inventor of Clearflow water hoses, the founder and president of Everlast Plastic. Roger calls himself the clear inventor, the green inventor, the clear inventor for sure. So welcome, Roger. Thank you for getting to us. It's been a long time planned and never made it happen. So I'm really glad you took the time on your way back from the US, stopping by our studio today. Roger, how does this work? How did you come up with this? I know you have many inventions.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be on your show. And I started off way back in late 1970s. My father and my great uncle were both inventors, and I was introduced to improving things through them.
And I understand you also have a background in building and construction, right? You did some very unique homes in your day.
That's true. Back in the 1970s in Toronto, the beach area, I renovated houses and I built a few new houses. And there I started to introduce innovative ways of building, and I focused a lot on the environment. Jimmy Carter was a great person, I thought, for leading that movement towards, he had solar panels on the greenhouse, wind farms back in the 70s. And so I had a great interest in that, and I was nominated for an Architectural Design Award on a house I built on Scarborough Bluffs that was designed to be heated with a wind generator, and it was passive solar. So that was sort of getting a jump on things.
Talk about being a visionary. You were certainly way ahead of the curve in those days, right? Because this is like 40 years back.
That's right. Although I had Jimmy Carter sort of as a guy that I could see was going in the right direction as far as energy savings and environmental issues.
Now, what led you into the flat, self-draining, non-freeze garden hose here? We have a little cover. Yeah, you show it to this camera. Probably.
I actually had a property on Lake Simcoe that was on rock, and you couldn't bury the water intake line from the well. So that had a freezing problem, and that's what got me started in the hose business. I was trying to come up with a solution for getting water from the shore well to the house without using electrically heated trace, what they call heat line or trace line. And that's very expensive to operate. A 100-foot line would cost you $600 or $700 in electricity costs over a season. And so I started coming up with how could we do this without using electricity. And I came up with this dual line hose, which is a self-emptying hose. So it has a round hose inside that's kept flat with a little bit of air pressure. Pump comes on, expands that inner line, and bumps up your air pressure between the two lines. And then when you turn off the pump, it self-empties. Okay. So that was my original concept, and I patented that line for supplying water to mostly rural places, farms as well as...
Yeah, like you need to have water with the livestock,
that's right.
The cows or the horses or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And you have to cover, 250 feet or however long.
That's right. So it's got a big application, both hoses actually, in that market. And we did this, how it works on the farm, going from a building to another building or to a water bowl for livestock.
So we think of
cottage
water
application, right? For, again, the same, trying to get water from a well to a house or a cottage.
Right.
So that's where I started. Now, this line relied on a bit of air pressure to keep a round hose flat.
So let me recap that. So when we think of a garden hose, we think about
a round hose.
The typical round hose. So you have two hoses more or less together, encapsulated.
Yeah, I did for these were rated to -40.
Okay.
Okay, Celsius or Fahrenheit. They meet at minus 40.
Okay.
So that hose design was designed for that. But then I had people come to me and say, you know, my inner hose was NSF for potable water, and an improvement on this line, I stopped making them round and I made them flat. Because I'm thinking, why use air pressure to make it flat? Just extrude it flat, like this hose.
Oh, I see.
extruded
So
flat.
the initial version, you needed that air pressure to flatten it once
Right.
the water was out.
Then I had organic. I was an organic farmer for 10 years, so I had organic growers of veggies saying, wow, we'd really like to use my NSF hose, which is, NSF is National Safety Foundation for Potable Water. But it's expensive in a dual line system, so I started thinking of ways I could make a standalone hose. So then I made this. This is a 75-foot hose, and that 75-foot hose weighs about 3 pounds.
Where were you 25 years ago when I had this little trolley with garden hoses going to the apple trees?
Yeah, you can put 500 feet of my hose on a 12-inch wide spool with a 12-inch flange. So that's what evolved from the dual-lined hose. I simplified it to a flat standalone hose.
So that can lie down somewhere in the snow. You might have a meter of snow above it, and yet you can have water go through it, and it drains itself. It doesn't freeze. Is that the minus 40 rating, much like the dual hose that you talked
Well, the
about?
inner material is rated to minus 40, but the standalone hose, it doesn't have a jacket around it. Like this is shown in a fire hose or in a polyethylene pipe, and that gives it a jacket and airspace, which works as an insulator. So that's good to minus 40. This hose is good to minus 10 Celsius. 14 Fahrenheit.
So anybody in Toronto could actually leave it out all year round in the backyard.
And people use it for livestock down to lower temperatures by removing the end fitting. So you've got an end fitting on here that can be removed easily. And that's another part of my patent. I have the only system where you have an O-ring that looks like a factory clamp that actually can be removed by just using a screwdriver to pry it off. And you can use channel locks and a mallet to drive this round ring back into place. And so that lets people change fittings, but it's a very specialized way of clamping because it needs to be very uniform because the material is stretchy.
Now let's allow me a question. Clear. What is the significance of clear? Our audience may not be aware what's happening in their garden hose when it's lying there all summer, let's say.
Okay. The original concept of clear was that UV can penetrate it and radiant heat can penetrate it. So this hose does not get hot. On your conventional garden hose, in warm climates or a hot day even in Toronto, you've got almost scalding water coming out of the hose. With it being clear, the radiant energy goes through the hose so that there's no heat buildup. And the other thing, of course, UV going through the hose helps keep bacteria away. Now, that's my concept when I invented it. I've actually talked to the local Hastings Quinte Health Department water expert who recommend only my hose. They said it's the only safe water hose to buy to the public. And the reason for that is this water expert actually enlightened me in that he said when it stretches, so when this goes into a round hose, material is actually stretching. And I have a picture of that on my card, which I'll pull out here and let people see so they get a better concept of what I'm talking about.
So as the water is flowing through this clear hose, it expands and it looks like a traditional round hose. The water pressure makes it, expands it.
Looks like that. Whether you can pick that up or not, but it stretches into a round hose. And when it stretches, there's a static charge created on the surface because of the molecular movement of it stretching. Bacteria and algae won't go anywhere near that static charge. So the hose, I have pictures of the hose that...
May I have a look at this?
That's 4 years old, and I have a blow-up of that here, a picture of a hose that's 4 years old that is still crystal clear. And that's because algae or bacteria, anything like that, will not go anywhere near because of the static charge every time it moves.
So there is no growth possible. So this makes it ideal for RVs or cottages.
Well, even big companies, we've had organic growers that have just rinsed off their organic produce with a regular hose and had it rejected when they took it to market because the chemicals from the existing regular hose polluted the crop.
You bring up a good point. We are not scientists, the average consumer. What's the difference in material? Obviously, your plastic is different than my regular garden variety green garden hose I bought somewhere.
Absolutely. This material is polyurethane. It's a very inert material, so it doesn't give off and it doesn't pick up. So it's a much more expensive material. Your regular garden hoses are typically made out of PVC, which is a really nasty plastic. You've probably heard about kids' PVC toys and all the problems.
Yeah.
And then they also make them out of rubber. And so rubber has a lot of toxins. So the water expert from the health department told me that because when plastics get hot or rubber gets hot, it will give off chemicals. So those hoses produce a chemical slime. And bacteria likes to house in the chemical slime. It's a good place for it to live. So you've got a dual problem. You've got chemicals coming out of the hose, and if you Google what chemicals come from a conventional garden hose, there's an array of horrible chemicals that cause all sorts of health problems.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying this. So now it makes sense that the organic farmer or gardener got his produce rejected because he just rinsed it with a dirty garden hose, so to speak. That's right.
And so he was at one of our booths buying up my hoses because, well, and the other big thing that just happened, Dole just had a huge recall. All of Canada and half of the United States, their packaged garden veggies had to be recalled because of a water-based bacteria problem. And so I'm trying to contact Dole because if they're using regular hoses to wash the organic produce as it comes off the field, or any produce for that matter, whether it's organic or not.
Who knew? I didn't know.
Yeah.
I gardened. I used my regular garden hose to water, and I did my best to keep my soil organic, and chances are there was not so good things coming out of my hose. Yeah,
and the vast majority of growers haven't thought of the hose as a problem.
Yeah.
And Evergreen, who are people here in Toronto, a non-for-profit organization trying to educate people about the benefits of growing organically. They're located on Bayview Avenue,
right,
in the where the Don Valley Parkway is, in the Don Valley Parkway, and they have tons of school children come in, and they're really working hard at being environmentally sound educators. And they've actually they're just ordering my hose in bulk rolls, and every 10 feet we you can probably see it on this hose, we label the hose every 10 feet, so a retailer can have this 500-foot spool and make custom lengths, because they're catering to a lot of people with apartments or townhouses who have balcony gardens. So now they only need 15 or 20 feet to reach the sink to the balcony to water. And the beautiful thing with my hose, my 25-foot hose empties in 3 seconds. So now you don't have a mess or fuss with the water, and it's so compact.
So you could actually take it from the kitchen sink through the dining and living room, out the balcony door, water your plant, you don't have to carry your water. Ideal. Now, where else do you distribute it? I know you have a major retailer here in Toronto using it.
Home Hardware. So they comes under the Mark's Choice label with Home Hardware. And they have two labels. The first one was the Clear Flow hose with Mark's Choice, and then All Season Clear hose. They wanted to focus more on the winter uses And there are a lot of winter uses. If you want to wash the salt off your car, if you're a senior and you have arthritis and you don't want to chop ice, just take warm water and it melts the ice for you. So there's a lot of course, the typical skating rinks.
Yeah, you want your kids to skate on the backyard, you flood the backyard.
That's right. And then if you're a farmer, it's a huge thing for farmers because as a farmer, you've got livestock. So you're trying to get water to horses all season, all year round through the winter. And it's a big headache. They have to take regular hoses and try to drain them. And then there's the bacteria issue. That'll make horses sick.
Now, question. Do you make containers thinking about the horses and their kind of barrels from which they're drinking? Is that something down the pipe that you come up with? Do you have
I see what you're saying.
A good plastic container?
Yeah, an NSF. Home Hardware have been terrific in this field. That's why I chose them as a retailer because they're getting rid of their chemicals for their gardens and they're assuring that containers they sell are NSF for potable water. And it's a big difference between NSF 61 and food grade approval. So now the hoses that are out there that are, quote, drinking water safe are typically made from food grade plastics. And that's a big difference. They're still using PVC. So there's a big difference between food grade plastics and potable water.
So when I go into Home Hardware, I will find it on the label, food grade. Will it say that?
Yeah, well, what they say is drinking water safe. Like a lot of the white RV hoses are, quote, drinking water safe, but they're using food grade plastics, not NSF. And so there's a fine line there in between. So what I do, I make a sign for Home Hardware that says, stop and smell the hoses. And you can literally pick up any of their other hoses and you smell them, they smell of plastic or rubber. And they're putting antibacterial things in the drinking water PVC hoses to try to stop the bacteria from building up.
Well, the same idea that we put chlorine into our drinking water pipes, right? Yeah.
So with mine, you don't have to do anything. The hose stretching takes care of the bacteria problem.
Creates electricity that the bacteria doesn't enjoy and so they don't go there.
So I've had employees tell me from Home Hardware stores, they've watched people actually pick up the white hose, start to leave the store, see my sign that says stop and smell the hoses.
Yeah.
So they smell that hose and they smell my hose, so they put the other one back.
Very good.
So it's an interesting way to do a test, very simply. So that, you know, the other thing I invented was a way to wind these with a Velcro, bit of Velcro. So that, but you can use very compact. This winder is for an electric extension cord, 100 feet electric extension cord, and you can actually put 120 feet of my garden hose on a 100-foot electric.
This is like a regular electric cable drum. From
That's
the looks
right,
of
just
it.
what you'd use for an electric extension cord, right?
Yeah.
100 feet of electric extension cord. You can put 120 feet of my hose on it.
And it weighs nothing.
Yeah. Well,
This
about
is
5
cool.
pounds,
Yeah,
6
yeah,
pounds.
but not compared to 120 feet of a regular hose.
100 feet of rubber hose or good quality PVC hose with water in it typically weighs 50 pounds, 45 or 50 pounds. And my hose weighs 5 pounds because it's discharged the water. So we put a warning on the hose, a little warning label, because what happens, let's see if I've got one for a close-up, yes. The water actually comes out with more pressure than it went in. Because the hose is stretched, there's built up energy. So if you're at the end of the hose you can't quite reach, if you shut off the nozzle and wait a few seconds, open it up again, it'll shoot the water an extra 10 feet. Because as that comes back down from its stretched position, it actually creates more water pressure. So we warn people, when you're finished using the hose, open the nozzle and let it drain. Don't try to unscrew the nozzle or you're going to get soaked. So we actually put a warning on the hose. It behaves very differently.
Yeah, that may be unpleasant on a cold day. You know?
Yeah.
Don't mind it in the hot.
It can even be dangerous because if you've got a brass nozzle, it could actually fire it like a projectile as it comes off the fittings. And my fittings are nylon, so they're also flexible. You can drive over them. and they're also NSF for potable water. Even these rings are NSF.
No, but they have to come off in the wintertime, yes? That's what you were sharing earlier? Or can you leave them?
You can leave them. If you're trying to extend the cold temperature operation, if you're a farmer and you're trying to extend that winter use, if you take the end fitting off, there's no restriction. And so if it builds up a little ice, it'll just push it out. So I've had people use it down to minus 20, minus 25. Depending on the length of the hose as well.
Well, this is perfect for the upcoming gardening and planting and growing season the next couple of months.
And it's better than a drinking water bottle. So that's why on my card, which is sold over Amazon, this hose, I've shown a young person drinking.
So this is actually safe at this point then for the kids to pick up the garden hose and drink from it.
Absolutely.
Because there is no bacteria risk there.
Yeah, and the material, unlike drinking water bottles that put out BMP, this doesn't. It's actually better than a drinking water bottle, my hoses.
Okay. You were mentioning fire departments earlier. What do you do for the professional
other thing, my dual-lined hose, we have a fire hose, and I'm actually, in the U.S., my hose is being made by a fire hose manufacturer. And so we're talking now about using the same principle with fire hoses.
So if you turn this a little bit to the camera, the yellow on the right is the
an actual fire
hose. And on the inside it has this dual hose technology.
Yeah, it actually just has this type of hose, just one, with a little thinner line, and that now enables that fire hose to self-empty. So they're looking at that, implementing it to firefighters for two reasons. One, if you get a big 2 or 3 inch fire hose full of water 100 feet long, it's very heavy, and you need two firemen to move it.
Yeah.
What I'm proposing is you can simply have a automatic way of turning the water off at the truck, and the hose will empty itself. So now the hose weighs enough, so much more lighter, that one fireman can move it.
Okay.
But in rural areas, the hoses freeze. If you've got a 30 below temperature and a wind chill, their fire hoses freeze before they can roll them up and try to discharge them manually. My 100-foot hose is empty in about 9 seconds.
So therefore there is less breakage, there's less damage done, hopefully, or what is the benefit then?
If their hoses are frozen, they have to take them back to the station to thaw them out. They've told me they've lost houses because they've had a big fire and all their hoses are frozen. They have to wait till the thing thaws out. In the meantime, another fire pops up, and they have no hoses to fight it.
Hence the story, we have yet to lose a foundation.
Yeah, that's
Bad
right.
joke. But I heard a fireman say this once, and I thought that was not very encouraging.
That's a good one.
Anyway, that is very, very interesting. Do you have any last words? Because we are almost out of time here. How can people get in touch with you? We know they can get them at the home hardware stores.
Yeah. Clearflowwaterhose.com or home hardware stores in Canada, or the place I mentioned on Bayview, which is
the green Evergreen.
Evergreen.
They sell them.
Yes.
Is that where the old glass company?
Yeah, there used to be a big factory there.
Oh yeah, the big chimney is there.
Yeah.
On
and right on
west
Bayview.
Side of the DB.
Yeah, west side of Bayview, just north of Bloor.
Yeah.
And they're a great non-for-profit organization. They're just trying to get the message out to be green.
Well, I think it's amazing. I didn't know that you had this kind of a tool for, apartment and condo dwellers in the city here as well. It's wonderful.
And hoses go so many places as well. There's all sorts of applications for commercial, where this is clear and it saves product when they're putting it through, food industry, that sort of thing. The other thing I'll quickly mention is that my next project is I have a pump. And my pump technology will save a huge amount of energy.
Yeah.
And it runs on about a quarter of the energy that conventional pumps use, and it doesn't freeze. And last year, worldwide, they sold $40 billion worth of pumps.
So we're talking pumps to go into well to supply a household with water?
I've talked to the City of Toronto, one of their senior people from the waterworks in the beaches,
Yeah.
and he was just amazed. If you look at the pumps the city uses to create water pressure for the city, the technology is like 50 years old, 60 years old. And I could totally save the city a huge amount of energy. And then that lends itself to people in developing countries as well. Water, the United Nations has pegged water as the most important issue of this century.
Oh, sure.
And so getting water to people, interesting quick little statistic, how much of the water that falls and melts from snow do you think goes back to the ground table?
Very little.
6%.
Very little, yeah.
So that's a resource. It's not something that's replenished very quickly. It takes many, many years, many decades for it to rebuild. And so diminishing water table for water supply is a huge problem.
Well, it's a huge issue in Africa, like Niger and all of these places, the water table where, let's say, a grandmother, just 80 years back, was living in front of a lake.
Yeah.
It's all dried up. They now have to have 150, 180 feet deep wells. It used to be just 10 feet and you had water.
Yeah, and
it's been in just one generation. It's really scary.
And that's based to the population explosion on the planet and to global warming, which evaporates more heat, evaporates the water, and then we're getting these new category storms and tornadoes, hurricanes. It's all because there's more heat and more water. I have one of my people golfs with a man that just retired out of the Arctic, and when he started, his job was to monitor ice thickness. When he started, it was 25 feet thick, and 30 years later, it's 5 feet.
Yeah.
So all that water is going somewhere, and it's going into the environment, and with increased heat, you're getting more evaporation, so that's what's feeding the storms and flooding and all the other
So
problems.
when can we have the pump? We can have you back to talk about the pump.
Yeah.
Any timeline on that yet?
Well, I could talk about the pump, but I'm trying to get funding to get
to make that happen.
Yeah, I have prototypes of the pump, but as far as getting it manufactured for market.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, it's been really nice to have you finally on the show,
well, thank
Roger.
you very much.
And we can hope that many people go out and buy their hoses by the yard, right? Or by the meter. You can. Does Home Hardware do that? Like you could go and say 2 meter or meter 50 or 4.5 meters.
Some of the home hardware stores do that.
Yeah.
But
the Evergreen does that.
Evergreen in Toronto does that, and I'm hoping to get Ace Hardware in the U.S. And expand those choices for people, and it helps me from a funding standpoint. To go on to my next project. As an environmentalist, that's my main focus. It's not about necessarily making a lot of money. It's more about being able to I have 30 patents, so getting my other products to market.
Well, hey, that's explicable then that you are a busy person and things change in your agenda very quickly.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for being here, and hope to see you very soon. So this is Roger Walsh and the Everlast Plastics company who brought about the clear, self-draining all-season hoses. And you can reach Roger by going to www.allseasonwaterhose.com. Yes? Thank you so much, and please stay with us here in Liquid Lunch. We are sticking with inventions, and we are going to hear from Professor Gangali and Professor Hensel, where we discover what they have done already as far as keeping the air clean, indoor air quality we're discussing. We're talking about cleaning of water purification as well, and how to reduce the exhaust coming from our diesel and gas engines. So please stay tuned here with us at Liquid Lunch this Friday here in Toronto, the 26th of February. We'll be back in a minute.